Welcome in, LSU fans, to another edition of the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon, alongside Glen West, where we get ready for the official visit season, officially kicking off, I guess, in a bigger capacity. We know LSU had an official visitor back, one of the tight ends that committed to Colorado back in early May. But this is kind of when really things start to kind of get ramp up. They start to get going. And we got all the coverage over at Go 24/7. Before we get started, I do want to let people know, we'll let them know at the end. But if you don't, for some reason, make it to the end of the podcast, get your 60% off deal right now. Click the link down below in the description, whether you're on YouTube or over there on any podcast platform. Make sure you do that. Join the site. Truthfully, Glenn, you know as well as I do, there's not a better time to get in, I think, right now with the recruiting season kind of starting to heat up. So make sure you get that subscription and you can experience the aura of Glen West on the message boards. No, that's an inside joke. You can ask on the message boards if you want. He'll explain more. But anyways, let's talk a little bit, Glenn, about this official visit weekend because I think loaded is the right terminology for any weekend that LSU is going to have during the month of June. You've got a lot of high profile prospects, but man, I think there's a lot of recruits that could really make an impact and maybe even an early impact if they choose to commit and eventually sign and enroll at LSU. Just before we get into the specifics of some of the guys, just kind of talk about what is your vantage point. You've covered recruiting for a while now, of just that first official visit weekend and kind of how you can look. I mean, this is the first for many of these guys, going on official visit. So this is kind of the tone setting opportunity. You don't have the last one. You don't have one in the middle. You kind of set the tone for a lot of these kids as they go throughout their visits.
Yeah, I think the thing that sticks out is just kind of you mentioned this is the sheer volume of how
Mhm.
many guys are in town this weekend. I believe we have an even 13, or I guess I should say an odd 13. There's a baker's dozen. So, we've got LSU's got a ton of interesting prospects in town, and a lot of those guys are very highly touted 5-star offensive linemen or defensive linemen. You got high
Mhm.
4 stars, certainly the quarterback. Anytime you have a quarterback that's top 10 in the country who seems to be narrowing in his focus on a couple schools, and LSU being one of them, with Bo Bentley, that's certainly going to bring a lot of excitement and optimism, I think, to the program and just the kinds of players that they're attracting to Baton Rouge. So, but look, I mean, we had this roundtable thing where you, me, and Sonny kind of all gave our thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, about
Mhm.
just kind of where the official visit season is in terms of importance and all that stuff with the overall landscape of recruiting, and how you can bring in a guy now, you can get him committed in June, July, but can you carry him all the way through December is the big question mark. And I think in previous years there would probably be some hesitancy from me and from maybe other people that cover LSU recruiting and things of that nature, just on uh, what LSU has resource wise, and just kind of how they can compare with some of the other big programs that are going to be honestly going after some of these guys at the last minute. And I think LSU
Mhm.
is a really good spot going forward here. I think they addressed all of that last December, January, and are in a really good place here, especially with revenue sharing kicking in July. You get another added bonus there, in addition to everything that's kind of already kind of taken place here with their collective and whatnot, their donor base, and getting that in lock unison. So I think that from a resource perspective, there's no high school player out there that LSU can't get from a financial standpoint. And then it goes to relationships, and relationships are still an important part of this. And that's
Mhm.
where you really kind of get into the importance of a weekend like this, or a month-long stretch like this, where you have a chance to get a lot of these high school prospects on campus, a lot of these recruits around your coaching staff, around the current players, the facilities, and that sort of thing. So I do think, for example, Sonny dropped a great little tidbit on our going to Go 24/7 message board. Bo Bentley will be bringing his mom, his dad, his younger brother, his older brother. I think they've got a huge family coming in this weekend to really kind of take in LSU, and it'll be on Joe Sloan and a lot of those offensive coaches and personnel guys, to recruiting staffers, to make those guys feel at home. And I think that's still an important part of this at the end of the day. And you touched on that in your answer, and you can kind of build on it. But I do think that from the two most important components being finances and relationship building, you have to like where LSU sits with a lot of
Yeah.
those, kind of factors, when they bring in guys for official visits and things of that nature, and see if they can't try to close the deal on some of these players that they've brought in. So this is a time where you get momentum swings and all that stuff, and kind of good vibes coming out of the visits. I'm sure we'll all have 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces next week on how many different prospects love their visit to LSU, and we'll certainly get all that info for you guys. But the relationships and the financial part are things that in past years, or I should say just the financial part, but in past years where LSU maybe was behind on some things, they're no longer behind. I think they're right
Yeah.
there with a lot of the big programs, and that's probably where I would lean into official visit season being more about relationships and more about, okay, here's our plan for you. Let's go attack it. What do you need? And let's get this done, kind of thing.
I think it's important to understand, and kind of going off that question in our roundtable, that relationships still do matter, and obviously the financial component we've talked about does matter to a lot of these kids. You're not getting an official visit, or you're not taking an official visit, whatever side you want to look at it from, if you don't understand at a baseline that one, financially, it's going to be competitive for you, or two, that the relationship you have with whether it's a position coach, the guy who maybe a recruiting staffer that recruited you, or even Brian Kelly himself, there's a foundation, there's a baseline for you there. So I think understanding what an official visit means is essentially that LSU feels that way about you, and that you kind of feel like, hey, on the service level, those two boxes are checked. When you get into these meetings, when you get into this weekend, and even talking to a guy like Deuce Gerald's, today about this, and even a couple of other guys, Braden Fogel with Alex Atkins, like these official visits are really utilized to say, okay, what's the plan? Like when kids visit in the spring, Glen, and we see them out there, it's, hey, kind of take in practice. You're going to get a little bit of a portion, maybe watching the team meeting. Um, you're going to get a little bit personalized. These official visits are very personal. They're very tailored to, here's what we can do for you and what we think you can also do for us, whether it's breaking down, like we've talked with guys about this, and even kind of going back, like Solomon Thomas, who's part of last year's class, talked a lot about this when he visited LSU. Like Brad Davis sat down with him, and they went through his film and pointed things out, like had the clicker, the little laser out, and saying, hey, we do this, and this is where you fit, or this is where we can help the game. And you know money, all these things matter, but I think the personal aspect is where you, like you talked about, you either kind of make or break some of these recruitments for you. So for LSU in particular, I think this weekend has the opportunity. You mentioned the volume of guys that you have. It's talent, but it's a really good mix of some really good talent, but a lot of guys too. Like it's not, I wouldn't say, Glenn, it's lopsided in quantity over quality, or vice versa. Like I think it's a pretty balanced, concerted effort of the guys that they've brought in. And obviously, if you don't know who they brought in, you can head over to Go 24/7 and find that list there. Some addendums happening to that list kind of as we go throughout the week. That's going to happen. Some guys kind of fall off the OV wagon. Other guys, conflicts happen. They've got to schedule it later. Or, they've decided maybe LSU's not the place for them, or LSU's decided that we've got, other guys on our board that we want to go after. That being said, it has the potential to be a really big weekend, Glenn. And even before we kind of get into the players, I imagine, and having talked with some of the guys this week already, there's going to be a concerted effort to get these guys in and around Alex Box to get a little bit of a feel of what this fan base can be. And, we've seen where guys have, baseball and football recruiting have overlapped, right? Where guys have gone to football games, football players have gone to the baseball games. I imagine it's going to be pretty cool to pull up on campus for a lot of these kids tomorrow and see the RVs and see obviously all the fanfare happening as they get ready for a regional weekend. So if you're LSU, if you're Brian Kelly's staff, you're like, hey, Jay Johnson, we appreciate that because school's out. You're kind of worried about what it's going to feel like. It's going to feel like it's, a big primetime atmosphere, even though the opponents aren't necessarily popping off the page. Maybe that's an underrated part of having a regional in your backyard this weekend, to be able to kind of showcase the fan base and the pageantry and obviously the passion.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, two birds with one stone there, and LSU fans, especially at Alex Box, baseball fans are very passionate fans, and kind of the one thing that I think you like about that stadium and about that ballpark is that they're all kind of on top of each other too. So, when
Yeah.
it's loud in there, it's really loud. And I would imagine there's going to be some really loud moments over the next several days. And so, yeah, sure. I think that can be a part of the visit and bringing over the recruits that are interested in kind of checking all that out. But, look, just from a pure just recruiting prospect standpoint, like this is a huge uh, weekend in terms of guys that are very highly touted in this class. Whether you look
Hmm.
at guys like Emmanuel Iheanacho, the offensive tackle out of Maryland, he's a 5-star. You've got Calvin Russell, who's a very late addition to this official visit weekend. He's a 5-star wide receiver. And then I believe the last one is Trenton Henderson, who's a 5-star edge rusher, who I think is very much LSU's very much in the mix for as he starts his official visit process. And I think kind of a common theme with a lot of the players as I've done research and as you've reached out to these players and as we've written stories on it, a lot of the guys, it doesn't seem like that LSU are bringing in this year are leaning one specific way going into official visit season. Like I think
Yeah.
that there's a lot of guys out there who are keeping a very open mind. And when you're a school like LSU, who's bringing in a lot of out-of-state players this weekend, I think that's a good thing. Like you have a seat at the table. You're going to have their full attention this weekend to potentially make a huge pitch to them. And I really think that there's an opportunity to capitalize here in the trenches. I mean, just by
Mhm.
the sheer volume of guys that they're bringing in. Deuce Gerald's is another one on the defensive line. I believe they're bringing in a couple other offensive line, defensive line kind of players. And, I think that this is a really good opportunity here for Brad Davis, for Kyle Williams. I mean, this will be the first really big time recruiting weekend that Kyle Williams has had since
Yeah.
accepting the job. So I'll be interested to hear what those defensive line prospects are saying about him and how he's communicating with them and their families and the message and what they kind of see for their future on the defensive line. So lots of things here that I think could go in LSU's favor just in terms of making that good first impression, because it is May
Mhm.
30th and a lot of these guys are going to take more visits, right? And so you've got to be able to make sure that you not only make a great impression, but you make a lasting impression. And
Yeah.
so that'll be really important. And that's something that I think, recruiting staff, the coaching staff, all these guys are really good at and have shown to be over the last couple of years. But what about you? Are there any specific prospects, players? You've talked to a lot of these guys over the last week. Anybody that's really standing out to you as a prospect that if LSU hits this weekend with their visit, they could be in a really good really good position here going forward?
Yeah, I did want to mention he's not on this list for me, but Calvin Russell just casually being mentioned as a late addition. I mean, it's the number 2 player in the state of Florida, number 3 wide receiver in the country. I mean,
Yeah.
that speaks to the volumes of what LSU can do in terms of the wide receiver recruiting department to kind of keep that one under his wraps as long as they have been able to. Glenn, I think when I look at the position that I'm more intrigued by, it's that defensive end spot. And obviously, that was one thing for me I put in our roundtable because Kevin Peoples has not made an addition there. We know that he was I would say pretty selective last year with the guys that he wanted. Like he zeroed in on a guy like Damian Shanklin and was like, hey, this is where I want to go. And they got the job done. They went and got him. That's who they wanted. When you kind of look at what they're bringing in this weekend, you have Jamarian Carlton, you have Trenton Henderson out of Pensacola Catholic. Those two guys probably fit a little bit of the bill of what you were talking about. There's some predictions that A&M and Texas are maybe kind of in the lead there for Carlton. I know our 24/7 sports analysts have talked about the fact that LSU could be a dark horse for him. And I was talking with some people this weekend, in and around that building that kind of feel like, we could make up some ground if you're an LSU, staffer or fan or anything on Carlton, where the Texas schools have done a good job recruiting him. And obviously LSU is not too far away from where he's from. And then Trenton Henderson out of Pensacola Catholic, LSU, it's funny enough, Glenn, didn't realize it at the time, but actually when I was in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, Brian Kelly joined, and they were doing some stuff with the guys that he was kind of sending off the NFL, and was talking with some people around him, and they were doing some recruiting visits. Kevin Peoples was going to some schools. They made the trip from Mobile to Pensacola Catholic. They visited him multiple times. They offered his younger brother, a class of 2028 prospect, there as well, just in the past couple of weeks. So kind of with both of those guys, I think it's where you're not in the lead. There's maybe not a clear leader. I mean, Auburn's really done a good job recruiting Henderson and his younger brother to this point, but a decision's not going to be made out of this weekend. But I think what it does, it really establishes yourself as, okay, he and his camp, both of these guys, they know what you're about and you know what they're about. Like, what are the important things to them after you leave this? And also, you look at the recruiting rankings, these are two of the more high profile kind of defensive line edge guys. They could play on the outside, put their hand in the dirt in the country. So you're kicking off this official visit season by saying, these two guys, we want to set the tone. And we can get into this a little bit later. I think if I'm just a fan watching recruiting, right? You really want the last visit, right? Like that's what kind of the thing is. If you don't have the last one, man, I kind of would like to have the first one. I think in the middle is where you're kind of, and it's not to say that the official visitor list in the middle, LSU's not going to be able to get any of those guys. It's just setting the tone or kind of closing the curtain is kind of the best position. And so I like where LSU sits with those guys this weekend. I think there's a clear plan. And even talking with some people about Carlton specifically, he wants to really see, he saw what they did with Swinson and Savion Jones, people's in year one. You brought in a whole crop of some veteran guys that are looking to capitalize and get some NFL money. And, what does that look like this year? So Carlton's decision apparently is not going to come till later in the year, but like you mentioned, man, you could really, really get him excited, get them excited about what could happen. And then obviously success in the season could help that. So the edge position for me, and I mean, I guess you could throw Deuce Gerald's in there too, just defensive line, just wanting to beef up and get some serious talent.
Emmanuel Ruffin.
Start to tack. Yeah. No, and Emmanuel Ruffin
He's a
out of the middle of Alabama. I mean,
very
you
high
got some
riser in
guys.
the latest 24/7 Sports
Yeah.
rankings. I think he's up to like a top 115 player in the country or something, and he was like a 3-star 88 or something before that. I mean, he was
Made some strides in the
made
camp
some big
circle, in the
strides for
camp
sure.
circuit. So yeah, I think it's just the defensive line for me. Maybe
Yeah.
that's too obvious. I
Well,
just I
I mean,
like
it's
it.
not obvious because they're
Yeah.
bringing in 4 or 5 different prospects, so that's
I think
definitely
they
going to
got
be a
if they
big.
can hit on two of these guys, Glenn,
Oh,
and in the fall, and they get them to sign, you could probably point back to, hey, May 30th was where that foundation was set.
well, yeah, well, 2 of those guys, and plus you got Lamar Brown on June 20th. I mean, that's
Yeah.
obviously the big priority right there in terms of defensive line recruiting. I'm going to take this on the offensive side of the ball. For me, you could certainly look at wide receiver and what they're bringing in with Jalen Lott and certainly Calvin Russell now this weekend. But they have such a strong nucleus at receiver already. I think the thing that could really tip the scales for this offensive recruiting in particular is getting the quarterback on board.
Mm.
And Bo Bentley is the guy that I'm going to be watching very, very closely. And those are, the people on the site that have read our work and stuff for the last couple of weeks and months know how high we are on Bo Bentley, just in terms of the massive improvements that he's made from his junior season and really carrying that into this past offseason, or it's kind of the beginning of the year where LSU really started to get in on him. And I think Joe Sloan made that offer back in February, and they've been recruiting him very hard ever since then. I think they've really zeroed in on him being the guy. Like if they could make the successful pitch this weekend and are able to get him on board and committed sometime, whether it's in the immediate or distant future, that would be a huge win for LSU to kind of get that quarterback on board with the 3 commits you already have at receiver with Tristan Keys, Jabari Mack, and certainly Kenny Darby.
Mhm.
So that would probably be where I would lean, just because LSU has been trending towards Bentley for a while now. It's really down to LSU and Oklahoma. Everybody's heard us talk about this, but Oklahoma's already got a quarterback in their class. Would they be able to carry 2 or get both of those guys through to December? I think that's a big question mark that they have to go and answer. And Bentley's going to be visiting Oklahoma right after LSU. So like I said, to begin this thing, you not only want to make a great first impression, you want to make a lasting impression, certainly as Bentley goes into that Oklahoma visit next week, and really kind of get your P's and Q's together on how he fits into your system. Recent success you've had with quarterbacks, obviously developing with Jaden Daniels, and certainly with Garrett Nussmeier, and what many people believe will be a really knockout year 2 for Garrett before he goes off to the NFL as a first-round draft pick. So if you're just looking at this from a purely logical football point of view,
Yeah.
I just don't know that there's many programs out there that can have the recent history of success that LSU's had at the position, in terms of getting guys to the NFL, developing them, and pumping them out into the league than LSU. I mean, they've just done a really nice job of recruiting that position, developing that position. Certainly, Jaden Daniels was the transfer, but Nussmeier, a guy who came in 2021 and has stuck it out with you now for 5 years. I think that says a lot about this coaching staff and a lot about how they've gone about developing him. The faith that he has, obviously, in Joe Sloan, and this offensive staff, and so and the numbers that they put up last year. I mean, I know that there were some slippage points in 2024, but Garrett threw for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns, and that was considered an okay first year for him. Like, I think
Yeah.
there's just so much untapped potential there, that a guy like Bo Bentley, who is a smart quarterback, a guy who plays honestly a lot like Garrett Nussmeier. He's got a great arm. He's got he can make those NFL throws. He's probably a little bit more athletic than Garrett at this stage of his career too. So,
Mhm.
guy who can move a little bit and is big and strong and fast. So I think he would make just a ton of sense if you're able to get him and his family on board, with what you're preaching this summer. So he's somebody that could also, anytime you get a quarterback on board, those guys are automatic leaders of your class and can help you recruit other positions and other players, certainly on the offensive line. You've got, a guy like Braden Fogel, who's a tight end, who's coming in this weekend as well. And so he could spend some time around Bo Bentley, and certainly Ihanacho, the offensive tackle. I think there's a couple other offensive linemen that they're bringing in this weekend as well. So if you're able to get the quarterback piece of this thing fixed, I think it could lead to a domino effect with a lot of other offensive weapons. And so I'll be very interested to see if that happens sooner than later, and what kind of the feeling is coming out of the Bo Bentley official visit weekend this over the next couple days.
Yeah, Bentley feels like kind of like the catalyst. You don't necessarily, I'll say this: you're choosy about who you're bringing in when you bring in your top quarterback target, and that's a reason they wanted to get Calvin Russell in. For sure. I mean, Glenn, to think about what this wide receiver class could be. I mean, you're talking about levels that, and LSU's had some very, very good classes that they've brought in, but in terms of like star ranking, like if you hold on to Keys, you hold on to those in-state kids, and you go grab a Calvin Russell or someone like that, man, it's Jalen Lott, like that's really starting to get into territory of where that wide receiver room is going to be young and really dynamic.
Yeah, I
Wanted to
mean,
mention, oh, go
just
ahead.
a quick little point here. I mean, like, they're going to have a lot of turnover in that wide
Yeah.
receiver room, and so I think their pitch to these players and these elite caliber wide receivers can be like, yeah, we're recruiting the number one receiver in the country. We've got him committed, but there's 3-4 spots on the field that we're going to still need to fill at receiver next year.
Mhm.
And, we feel like, you can come in and be a part of that. And so I think that, they're going to try to get 4 or 5 receivers in this class, because I do think there's going to be some pretty major overhauls at wide receiver after this season. And so, yeah, well, it's a stay tuned kind of thing, because they had a 2-year stretch there where they brought in Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Terrace Marshall, and that was kind of the core of what became a historic 2-year run for LSU. They obviously had the class back in 2021 where they brought in Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors. They had Jack Besh in that class. Chris Hilton was in that class. So, they've shown a history of being able to recruit a lot of wide receiver talent in the same class, and being able to pump a lot of those guys out to the NFL or become major important contributors on their team. So I think there's a lot of history there they can point back to, and kind of help them with some of these recruitments if they really want to go out there and swing for the fences with a guy like Russell or Lott or Booby Feaster later this cycle. So lots of interesting possibilities at receiver.
We could focus on a lot of guys, but I think when you look at this list, Emmanuel Iheanacho really stands out, of just, not just from the physical stature standpoint, but just kind of what he brings to the table. Glenn, we know this is a battle that's brewing. Obviously, hometown school or home state school of Maryland feels like they're in this. Oregon, after missing out on one of the top offensive linemen, Jackson Cantwell. Uh, really kind of positioning themselves. They want to land him as well. Just kind of your thoughts heading into this weekend. There's not a, I'll be honest with you, there's not a ton of, Ian is not a guy that's doing a ton of interviews. I think that's the best way to put it. So there's not a ton of intel necessarily on his side of things. I kind of was able to gather this week that, you know, he's built a really good relationship with Brad Davis, and Davis likes his game. He respects Davis. And the pitch this weekend is going to be, hey, we just put 4 guys in the NFL off last year's offensive line, including a top 10 pick in Will Campbell. This is not just a place where you can come compete, win, and make some money. True, just being real. It's also a place where you can go play in the NFL. So just maybe your thoughts on Iheanacho heading into the weekend. And this is another position where, you know, I feel pretty good about Darius Gray. Like if he had to sign right now, I think LSU would be sitting pretty. But if you you kind of start getting into some of the guys that they're looking at, it's you know, it gives you a little, I guess, you know, jitters to kind of think about. You could have a class with Iheanacho and maybe Darius Gray, but that's Christmas morning for a lot of LSU fans. Just your thoughts on Iheanacho heading into the weekend, kind of where things stand.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in that camp too. Like, and I'll harken back to what I said maybe a little bit earlier, was that maybe it's a good thing that he hasn't done a lot of interviews and that there isn't a
Yep.
lot of information out there about where he could be leaning. I think Oregon right now is probably the perceived destination, but I don't think that's coming from him as much as it is just guys who are recruiting guys and certainly national analysts and things of that nature who are, you know, maybe reading between the tea leaves of different visits he's taken, different people they've talked to, and maybe not directly coming from him. But I do think that LSU is in a position here to make a move or at least get into some cleaner positioning with him. I think, look, they have Bryce Martinez, who's a top 10 offensive lineman in the country, already committed out of Louisiana. They've got Jalen Chapman, who's a 3-star guy, already committed out of Louisiana. I think what you're going to see here over the next couple of weeks is a lot of those out-of-state guys that Brad Davis has been able to recruit pretty well over his tenure at LSU. I mean, they've signed a ton of out-of-state talent that are now moving up the ranks, and you know, guys like Weston Davis is going to be, you know, a starter for LSU potentially this year. You've got, you know, some really young interior offensive linemen that you just brought in the 2025 class that are out of state guys, and will have a potential to be really, you know, pillars of your future, whether it's Carius Kern or Solomon Thomas, like we just talked about. But I do think that, you know, there's going to be room for guys like Iheanacho and Darius Gray to come in and potentially earn early playing time, because, you know, we don't have, it's different than the previous 3 years, right? Where you knew kind of LSU starting lineup when the offensive line was going to be pretty consistent for them if they stayed healthy. And it was just about who are they going to bring in after that to kind of help develop throughout the program. I don't think you get that feeling with this group yet. I mean, like, there's just so much undecided in this 2025 room that the pitch can also be for a guy like Iheanacho. Like, this is, you had some playing time available to you if you come here too. Like, you could play very early in your career if you play your cards right and you develop and you do all the right things. And so I think that there's there's going to be another couple offensive linemen signed in this class for LSU. Brad Davis is obviously recruited at an elite level over the last several years, and I'll be interested to see kind of what happens with him, because that's, you know, that's another guy that, you know, if you're able to bring him on top of what you've already recruited here over the last couple of cycles, you're just, you know, you're stacking 5 stars after 5 stars in every class. Eventually you're going to hit and you're going to get a group that's really elite, and like the one you just had for you know, a couple of years here,
Yeah.
where you were able to bring them in and develop them early and get them playing and have some real continuity there for a long future.
It's gonna be an interesting weekend. Guys like Zayden Crimpin, we haven't really mentioned, and he's been a guy they've really kind of put as a, you know, priority, I think, for LSU. And you talk about Brad Davis's ability to go into Texas. You kind of start to look at the past couple of cycles. They won a hard-fought battle 2 years ago with Cohen Eccles to get him over there. A couple of other, you know, Texas offensive linemen they've really done a good job with. So, man, it's going to be an interesting weekend, and it's a fun weekend. Obviously, kind of talking and covering the recruiting aspect, and you know, those visits. You know, Jaden Lott's another guy that I talked to in the spring and briefly, you know, have talked with him since then, and you know, he's a Texas legacy, but he's told me multiple times that does not mean that he's going to necessarily just sign the dotted line, because that's where and I want to say this, not just because his mom and dad went there. His mom was a really, really good track athlete, I believe. And then his dad was a really good, obviously a football player there too. So you just kind of look at some of the factors coming in this weekend. I think we end it right here with Glenn, kind of what you said. This is a program that has brought up the level of financial commitment to where now you're playing on the same playing fields as a majority of the teams. There's still some of the Oregons and the A&Ms that are playing at a tier that not a lot of people are playing at, but I do
Texas.
agree with you. The Texas, yeah, just big school in Texas, asterisk mark, that is what it is. But just in general, you're playing with the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Floridas, the Tennessees, the world. And now, man, it kind of makes for it's a different type of open season, I think. But man, it's a lot of fun. It's going to be a good time. So, like we said at the onset of the podcast, make sure you check out that 60% off deal. You can click the link down below; it'll take you straight to it. Sign up right now for the latest news, nuggets, and tidbits on LSU recruiting. And Glenn, you were out there today, baseball wise. Just a quick little plug, man. It sounds like the guys are pumped, ready to go, and I liked Kate Anderson's. No one beats the Tigers at 1 a.m. Hopefully, man, you don't have to, and I don't have to later this week and be there at 1 a.m. But
Yeah.
all things considered, seems like the guys are ready to go.
Fingers crossed about that. Should be pretty electric. And, those who have been at Alex Box for a postseason game, there's really nothing else like it. And so, yeah, it'll be very fun this weekend, and hopefully they can last a little while and make this a regional, super regional kind of deal, and see what kind of hand you get drawn next week.
I know I catch a lot of grief for a lot of the decor in my background, but one of the things I've enjoyed so much about coming down here and covering, Glenn, is that the constant saying, whatever LSU event is, there's just nothing else like it, and that's true. Whether it's a Saturday night in Death Valley or it's a baseball game, and I'm excited to experience my first postseason game at Alex Box there as well. So we appreciate everyone tuning in. Make sure you like the YouTube video. That continues to help us in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel as well. We'll probably hop on a pod recruiting wise or early next week to kind of revisit some of the things that happen and get you set there for official visit week number 2. He is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon, and we will catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.